The berserk variegated rats, after nearly annihilating the hell golden-haired dogs 10,000 years ago, left only one branch. This branch has been passed down to this day. However, to recuperate, they learned to hide and not expose themselves to people. Back then, they had made too many enemies, and if their branch's existence were exposed, they would certainly face a storm of attacks from those people. It was precisely because of this recuperation that the branch of the berserk variegated rats had always remained hidden in the shadows. Perhaps the hell golden-haired dogs were truly the nemesis of the berserk variegated rats, as they also left behind a branch at the same time the latter did. From then on, the two branches continued to fight. Being evenly matched, they fought for over 20,000 years. Until 100 years ago, a royal expert from the berserk variegated rats obtained a heavenly bead filled with the power of nature. With the heavenly bead, he managed to elevate his comprehension of natural profundity by several levels in a short period. Consequently, the balance between the two factions was broken. Under the leadership of that expert, the berserk variegated rats completely annihilated the hell golden-haired dogs. Of course, in their eyes, it was a complete annihilation. They did not know that when they were exterminating the hell golden-haired dogs, a hell golden-haired dog pup had survived. Moreover, that hell golden-haired dog pup, through its own efforts, gained strength no less than the two strongest royals of the current berserk variegated rats. The stronghold of the berserk variegated rats branch was located in a dark swamp. Rodent-type demon beasts inherently dislike light. They prefer to hide in the darkness because only darkness can bring them a sense of security, absolute security. Jin Sha, have you been here before? Today, in a corner of the vast stronghold of the berserk variegated rats branch, several uninvited guests appeared, flying swiftly under the guidance of a golden-robed old man. The one currently questioning the golden-robed old man was a purple-clothed young man following behind. Yes, master. Facing the purple-clothed young man's inquiry, the golden-robed old man responded respectfully. The ones who had arrived at this swamp, which was also the stronghold of the berserk variegated rats, were Duan Ling Tian and his companions, who had traveled a long distance. Jin Sha moved through the area as if he were strolling through his own backyard, which made Duan Ling Tian and the others feel a sense of surprise. Master, over there. Immediately after, Jin Sha continued to lead the way, flying directly towards the central area of the swamp without deliberately concealing their presence. Are you sure this won't alert them? Duan Ling Tian asked with a frown. Don't worry, master. Jin Sha responded while accelerating their pace. Who's there? After a while, a sharp shout came from the swamp in the distance. Accompanying the sound were several small black dots that soon appeared before Duan Ling Tian and his companions, growing larger in the process. However, even when they reached Duan Ling Tian and the others, the small black dots didn't become much larger. What appeared before Duan Ling Tian and his companions were 7 variegated rodent-type demon beasts, slightly larger than ordinary rats, with pairs of blood-red eyes gleaming. Berserk variegated rats. With just one glance, Duan Ling Tian recognized these 7 rodent-type demon beasts. They were exactly like the berserk variegated rats from the reincarnation Martial Emperor's memories. How dare a few little things act presumptuously in front of this emperor? As Duan Ling Tian, Feng Tianwu, and Xiong Quan tensed up, ready to act, Jin Sha spoke, his voice imbued with authority, spreading far and wide. Boom! At the same time, a vast surge of energy erupted from Jin Sha's body, sending the 7 berserk variegated rats flying. However, Jin Sha did not pursue them. He stood in place, raised his hand, and in his hand appeared an ancient token. The token was engraved with extremely complex and archaic patterns. Upon closer inspection, the patterns formed the image of a rodent-type demon beast. While Duan Ling Tian and the other 2 were deeply puzzled. Greetings, Third Imperial Grandfather. The 7 berserk variegated rats, who had been sent flying by Jin Sha, originally had increasingly bloodshot eyes and were about to call for other clan members. But when they saw the token in Jin Sha's hand, they all knelt in midair in a human-like manner. Now, as they knelt in midair, their bodies trembled, and their 7 pairs of blood-red eyes were filled with terror. Third Imperial Grandfather, spare our lives. We didn't know it was you. One of the berserk variegated rats said with a trembling voice. Third Imperial Grandfather, spare our lives. The other 2 berserk variegated rats pleaded along, their voices full of tremors. Scram! Jin Sha coldly shouted, raising his hand, and a surging force swept out, once again sending the 7 berserk variegated rats, who hadn't even entered the void transformation realm, flying. Immediately, the 7 berserk variegated rats fled into the distance as if relieved of a heavy burden. Moments later, the swamp returned to its quiet state. Master, please. The originally majestic Jin Sha, after the 7 berserk variegated rats left, respectfully stepped aside, humbly bowed to Duan Ling Tian, and gestured for him to proceed. However, Duan Ling Tian had no intention of moving. Jin Sha, what exactly happened just now? Why did they call you Third Imperial Grandfather? Duan Ling Tian asked curiously. Even now, recalling that scene, he still found it a bit strange. Logically, shouldn't Jin Sha, as a hell golden-haired dog, be the sworn enemy of the berserk variegated rats? Why did those 7 berserk variegated rats, upon seeing the token Jin Sha produced, not only obediently kneel, but also respectfully address him as Third Imperial Grandfather? Duan Ling Tian was completely baffled by this. In fact, it wasn't just Duan Ling Tian who was baffled. Feng Tianwu and Xiong Quan also looked puzzled, especially Xiong Quan, whose face showed confusion, while the look of shock had not yet faded. Just now, seeing the 7 berserk variegated rats prostrate themselves before Jin Sha and bow, it had given him too great a shock. He had no idea what was happening. Young master didn't say that hell golden-haired dogs and berserk variegated rats are sworn enemies? Xiong Quan was puzzled, extremely puzzled. Master, in the eyes of all the berserk variegated rats of this branch, the hell golden-haired dogs have become a thing of the past. They no longer exist. Facing Duan Ling Tian's inquiry, Jin Sha slowly said, "You mean they don't know of your existence?" Duan Ling Tian was not foolish. He could easily infer something from Jin Sha's words. Master is brilliant. Jin Sha nodded, giving Duan Ling Tian a resounding compliment. Let's put that aside for now. Explain to me why those 7 berserk variegated rats knelt down and called you Third Imperial Grandfather after seeing you take out that token. Duan Ling Tian looked at Jin Sha with a strange gaze. That token in your hand, you didn't snatch it from some royal of the berserk variegated rats, did you? Among the berserk variegated rats, the Imperial clan is the most revered. Below the Imperial clan are the Royal clan. The Royal clan has a close relationship with the Imperial clan. They are usually descendants born from the mating of Imperial and non-Imperial clan members. Although not inferior, they hold an extremely high status within the berserk variegated rats. Furthermore, some Royal clan members might even be the full siblings of the leader of the berserk variegated rats branch. Therefore, it's normal for a Royal clan member to be addressed as Third Imperial Grandfather. Of course not. Jin Sha shook his head, weighing the token in his hand. Master, this token in my hand is my own. To be precise, it was given to me by the 2 Imperial clan members of the current berserk variegated rats. What? It must be said that Jin Sha's answer completely astonished Duan Ling Tian, as well as Feng Tianwu and Xiong Quan. Aren't they your enemies? Why would they give you something like this? Xiong Quan asked, wide-eyed. I know they are my enemies, but that doesn't mean they know I am their nemesis. Jin Sha's eyes flickered, and under the puzzled gazes of Duan Ling Tian and the other 2, he slowly explained. Back then, I created an opportunity to infiltrate the stronghold of these berserk variegated rats. That time, I helped them solve a problem, and because I displayed strength no less than that of the 2 Imperial berserk variegated rats, I was recognized by them. It's quite comical. That time, I was actually forcibly pulled into a sworn brotherhood with them. Because I couldn't defeat them when they were berserk, I became the 3rd brother. The 2 of them, being equally strong, are temporarily co-ranked as Big Brother. When one of them becomes the leader of the berserk variegated rats in the future, they will become the sole Big Brother, and the other will be relegated to 2nd brother. At this point, Jin Sha's lips curled into a cold sneer. You became sworn brothers with them? Xiong Quan looked astonished. It was merely a formality. I only learned later that the reason for that sworn brotherhood was that they wanted to use me to help them accomplish something. They said beforehand there was no danger, but I almost lost my life because of that matter. At this point, Jin Sha said angrily with lingering fear, berserk variegated rats are indeed as recorded in our clan's ancient texts. Despicable and shameless things. Later, they still wanted to use me. so I left without saying goodbye. I originally came here to ascertain their true strength, and by then I had learned almost everything, so I chose to leave. Jinsha looked at the token in his hand and continued. This token was given to me after I almost died because of them. They called it giving me a status within the berserk variegated rats, second only to them. After listening to Jinsha's words, Duan Ling Tian and the other two suddenly understood, so that's what happened. So, with this token, we'll quickly be able to meet those two imperial berserk variegated rats of the berserk variegated rats. Xiong Quan's eyes lit up. Yes, Jinsha nodded, his eyes gleaming with cold light. If they knew I was coming back, I wonder how happy they would be. In their eyes, I am a powerful pawn, capable of doing many things that their own clan members cannot. Between Jinsha's words, a chilling killing intent was revealed. It seems the time Golden Fiend nearly lost his life really did put him in mortal danger. Otherwise, he wouldn't be this agitated. Duan Lingtian murmured to himself. Still, knowing he'd soon meet the two imperial bloodline members of the berserk rats put him in an excellent mood. That meant he could settle matters here, obtain the heavenly pearl, and head straight for the Yin-Yang sect station. Let's go. At Duan Lingtian's word, Golden Fiend took the lead, guiding the group deeper into the swamp's heart. There lay the gathering place of the berserk rat branch's royal and imperial clans. Berserk rats of royal rank or higher could assume human form, so their dwellings were delicate wooden structures, simple yet elegant. Third Imperial Uncle. All along the way, berserk rats who spotted the token in Golden Fiend's hand knelt in salute. Duan Lingtian and the other two followed close behind. Reaching the center, the trio brightened. The refined wooden buildings felt like another world. Well, if it isn't our dear third Imperial Uncle back again. A mocking voice rang out. Duan Lingtian saw a middle-aged man step from one of the buildings, eyeing Golden Fiend with undisguised contempt. Void Transformation Realm 8th level. He'd expected someone stronger. Turns out it was merely a Void Transformation Realm 8th level martial artist. A royal berserk rat? Duan Lingtian raised a brow and asked Golden Fiend. Yes, master. Golden Fiend nodded, stopped, and glared at the speaker, murderous intent flashing. Among the berserk rats, he's the one I hate most after those two scoundrels. Duan Lingtian knew exactly who those two were. The two imperial bloodline members who'd nearly killed Golden Fiend, his mortal enemies. Haha, Golden Fiend, you actually took him, master. What a joke. I can't wait to see the faces of our two emperors when they hear. The middle-aged man laughed, voice dripping with ridicule. Gak! His laughter cut off abruptly. A grisly hole had appeared in his throat, gushing blood. He collapsed, lifeless. Since you dislike him, shut him up for good. Duan Lingtian flexed his right hand, tone calm. Golden Fiend's pupils shrank. He'd heard only a fleeting sword cry. Before he could react, the detested royal berserk rat was dead. My lord's strength has risen again. Golden Fiend's eyes blazed. A wicked grin curved his lips. He moved like wind, a 3-foot green edge appearing in hand. His first-grade spirit sword. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. With dragon-like grace, sword light flashed, shattering every wooden building in sight. As the structures fell, so did numerous bodies in pools of blood. They were almost all royal berserk rats. Golden Fiend, have you lost your mind? Some stronger royals escaped the carnage. When they recognized the attacker, their faces paled. They knew him all too well. Golden Fiend, sworn brother to the two emperors, their third brother. Yet among the nobles, none acknowledged him, save the low-blood berserk rats. Now, seeing him slaughter royals, they thought him insane. Did he not fear enraging the emperors? The royal clan was the very foundation of their race. Only unions between royals, or royals and imperials, could birth new imperial bloodlines. Die! Golden Fiend's lightning sword answered them. Each fleeting sword cry signaled another royal death. Boom! Some royals berserk shifted for power, yet still fell to a single strike. So that's berserk? Though he'd read of it in Reincarnation Martial Emperor's memories, seeing it still surprised Duan Lingtian. These humans transformed from the violent hairy rats, once enraged, gain a layer of blood-red light in addition to the chi fused with concept. After going berserk, their strength soars. However, the increase is modest. Only a few hundred ancient horned dragons worth of power. That tiny boost means nothing before Golden Fiend, a demon emperor expert. Within moments, The center of the violent hairy rat station turned into a river of blood. Golden Fiend, how dare you? Golden Fiend, you're courting death. Just as the reek of blood shot sky high, and every rat in the swamp caught the scent and began to stir, the true masters finally appeared. Two scrawny, skin and bones old men stepped forward side by side. Their eyes glowed blood red, and waves of terrifying aura rolled off them. Fury, slaughter, savagery. One wore black robes, the other gray. The instant they arrived, their icy, blood-soaked gazes locked onto Golden Fiend. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Meanwhile, violent hairy rats from every corner of the swamp converged. When they saw the corpses of their royal kin littering the ground, they froze in disbelief. Who did this? They soon had their answer. The third emperor did it. Heavens, why would the third emperor do this? He's cutting the very roots of our race. Is he tired of living? Though the onlookers were many, none made a move. They knew it would be pointless. This third emperor rivaled the two emperors themselves. No ordinary rat could oppose him. They had not even entered the void transformation realm and could not assume human form. Ha ha ha. So you two old fellows finally show yourselves. Seeing the gray-robed and black-robed old men, Golden Fiend laughed wildly, voice dripping with reckless excitement. Golden Fiend, why have you done this? The gray-robed elder's eyes flashed with icy killing intent as he suppressed his rage and asked in a low voice. Why? Well asked. The moment the words left the gray-robed elder, Golden Fiend's laughter stopped. With a roar, blinding golden light erupted from his body, forcing the watching rats to squint. When they opened their eyes again, they couldn't help trembling. Their blood-red gazes turned even colder. What did they see? Before them stood a huge golden hound with a single black horn on its head. They knew this beast well. So you're a surviving cur of the hellish Golden Hound clan. And these three behind you, are they survivors too? The black-robed elder's blood-red eyes narrowed as he demanded coldly. Do you really think the handful of you can? The other gray-robed elder began just as icily, but his words died mid-sentence. No one had interrupted him. He'd closed his own mouth. At some point, a purple figure had appeared beside him, ghostly, silent. It was a youth in purple robes. He stood before the gray-robed elder, yet the 3-foot green edge in his hand was already buried in the elder's throat. Be easy. With a flick of the blade, a sword cry rang out. The gray-robed elder's head parted from his body. Whoosh! Almost the instant the sound cut off, the black-robed elder who'd been beside him shot away like black lightning, putting a great distance between them. Who are you? Staring at the purple figure, the black-robed elder's face was grim, his eyes full of dread. Though the strike had the taint of ambush, the fact that this foe could slip in under the noses of two royal rats and kill one of them proved his terror. His strength surpassed theirs. At the very least, it surpassed theirs before they went berserk. Boom. Without the slightest hesitation, the black-robed elder's surging chi turned into milky white flame that rose skyward, profound truth following close behind. At the same time, a column of blood-red light erupted around him, shrouding his body and making him seem taller. It was the violent hairy rat's innate berserk. In his hand appeared a saber, a narrow saber whose flowing radiance shimmered. Chi fused with profound truth poured into it, unstoppable. Whoosh! Immediately, the power of heaven and earth above the void realm stirred, converging into a heaven and earth phenomenon. That phenomenon condensed into 3 phantom images of the ancient azure dragon, winding down through the sky, delivering a crushing visual impact and darkening the already gloomy swamp. 3 ancient azure dragons worth of power. Impossible. Seeing the 3 dragon phantoms coiling above the black-robed elder's head, Golden Fiend's face changed drastically, shock and disbelief written across it. In Jinshaw's memory, the black-clad old man, if he didn't use berserk, was on par with him in strength. When he went all out, he could unleash the power of 2 ancient horned dragons and 5,000 ancient flood dragons. However, because he had been active as a bandit in the southern region of the Weak Water River for many years, he far surpassed the black-clad old man in combat experience and techniques. Therefore, in a contest of equal strength, he had the upper hand over the black-clad old man. But once the black-clad old man used berserk, he could instantly gain the power of 3,000 ancient horned dragons, possessing the power of 2 ancient horned dragons and 8,000 ancient flood dragons. The gap of 3,000 ancient horned dragons rendered his combat experience and techniques useless. Crushing. Absolute crushing. The black-clad old man, after going berserk, completely crushed him. However, he never expected that when he saw the black-clad old man again, his strength had already reached such a level. Once he went berserk, he had gained a full 2,000 more ancient horned dragons' power than before. Jin Sha, do you think I'm like you, still standing still? The black-clad old man heard Jin Sha's exclamation, looked at him first, and said disdainfully. However, after saying this to Jin Sha, he redirected his gaze to the purple-clad youth standing not far away, a chilling, killing intent flashing in his eyes. You are dead. The black-clad old man stared at Duan Ling Tian, speaking slowly, his voice utterly cold, as if it came from an ice cave. You want me dead? That depends on whether you have the ability. Facing the black-clad old man, who had 3 ancient horned dragon phantoms above his head, Duan Ling Tian's expression remained unchanged, completely unafraid as he met his gaze, his eyes calm, like a mountain that wouldn't budge even if it crumbled. Master, I'll help you. At this moment, Jin Sha flew out and stood shoulder to shoulder with Duan Ling Tian, staring directly at the black-clad old man, who was the only remaining royal berserk rat of the Berserk Rat clan. Although he knew his master was very strong, capable of unleashing the power of 2 ancient horned dragons and 8,000 ancient flood dragons when going all out. However, the power the black-clad old man was currently displaying was a full 2,000 ancient horned dragons' power stronger than his master's. Even if his master's sword skills were astonishing, with such a large power gap, he feared he would not be a match for the black-clad old man. You go do your own thing. This old fellow, I don't even put him in my eyes. Duan Ling Tian said to Jin Sha, implying that he didn't need Jin Sha's help to deal with the black-clad old man. Master, Jin Sha looked at Duan Ling Tian with a worried expression upon hearing this. Don't worry. Duan Ling Tian smiled faintly, his eyes full of confidence. After taking a deep breath, Jin Sha nodded heavily, choosing to trust Duan Ling Tian. Immediately after, his entire body moved, as if transforming into lightning, and he swept into the surrounding group of berserk rats. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. After transforming back into human form, Jin Sha's sword continuously swung out. Each time he struck, he effortlessly took the lives of several berserk rats. The sword in his hand was like the scythe of death. In the blink of an eye, many berserk rats died by his hand. These berserk rats, who hadn't even entered the void transformation stage, were like ants before Jin Sha, who was at Demon Emperor stage 6, and were easily defeated. Flee, flee. Facing this one-sided slaughter, the group of berserk rats scattered and fled. Help Jin Sha. At this moment, Duan Ling Tian's voice reached Feng Tianwu and Xiongquan's ears. Hearing Duan Ling Tian's words, the two seemed to have received an order and both attacked, helping Jin Sha slaughter the scattered berserk rats, a completely one-sided massacre. Wherever they went, the corpses of berserk rats fell, as if a heavy rain had begun. Die! The black-clad old man saw the bloody scene around him. An extreme killing intent appeared in his originally blood-red eyes. After a roar, he directly attacked Duan Ling Tian. As soon as he attacked, it was with full force. Buzz! The blade, containing the power of 3 ancient horned dragons, followed like a shadow, striking towards Duan Ling Tian with fierce momentum, as if wanting to kill Duan Ling Tian with one strike to rescue its kin. Facing the black-clad old man's fierce strike, a hint of disdain appeared at the corner of Duan Ling Tian's mouth. Immediately after, he flicked the 3-foot azure sword in his hand and met it without dodging or evading. Boom! In an instant, a 5-colored power surged from Duan Ling Tian's body. As soon as the 5-colored power appeared, it transformed into the shape of a sword, making Duan Ling Tian appear like a giant 5-colored sword. Buzz! Whoosh! A blade and a sword fiercely clashed, with no reservations from either side. The black-clad old man, enveloped in a bloody aura, unleashed a full-force strike, comparable to the power of 3 ancient horned dragons. The blade glow emitted waves of sharp aura wherever it passed. Waves of air rolled, strong winds raged, sweeping out like blades, leaving clear blade marks on many withered trees in the swamp. Although Duan Ling Tian's 3-foot azure sword struck later, it was no less powerful, The surging power in his body continuously poured into it, then unleashed. Around his body, continuous explosions of air vibrated, causing waves of air to constantly burst in the air, stirring up gusts of strong wind that made his purple robe flutter wildly, looking incredibly elegant. Because he struck later, the power from Duan Ling Tian's 3-foot azure sword was mostly released in a hurry, and after colliding with the black-clad old man's blade, it clearly fell into a disadvantage. Overestimating yourself, the black-clad old man, who had forced Duan Ling Tian back 2 steps with one strike, showed disdain. After a sarcastic laugh, the blade in his hand continued forward, intending to shatter Duan Ling Tian's 3-foot azure sword and then cleave Duan Ling Tian in two. However, very quickly, his expression changed. He found that the power of the purple-clad youth's 3-foot azure sword was continuously increasing, as if it had no end, impacting his power again and again. It was like constantly crashing waves that converged, their force overlapping repeatedly, and by the end, it put immense pressure on him. Boom. Finally, he felt the power of the opponent's 3-foot azure sword burst forth in an instant, completely crushing his power. This power came too fast, erupted too fast, leaving him no time to fully react. By the time he reacted, he only felt a flash before his eyes, and he just caught sight of the natural phenomenon formed in the sky above the opponent's head. In an instant, his pupils suddenly constricted, shrinking to their extreme. And this was destined to be the last expression of his life. As he saw the natural phenomenon in the sky above the purple-clad youth's head, a seam appeared on his glabella, a subtle seam. The seam continuously expanded, turning into a bloodstain. Crack! The black-clad old man's body was split in two. Boom! The old man, whose pupils had constricted to their extreme, was split in two. Before his body could completely separate, it was enveloped by a rolling 5-colored power, instantly blasted into dust. Dead beyond dead. Whoosh! A gust of wind blew past, leaving only the purple-clad youth standing there, his purple robe gently swaying, his expression calm and unruffled. As for the sword in his hand, it had long since disappeared without a trace. That sword Saint Feng Qingyang seems to have not exaggerated. I've only grasped the superficial understanding of the sword Tao he left behind, and the sword's profound truth has improved to such a degree, it's truly divine. The purple-clad youth was precisely Duan Ling Tian. At this moment, he was murmuring to himself, "These 2 months have been like a dream." As he continued to murmur, Duan Ling Tian sighed lightly, but a faint smile played at the corner of his mouth. At the same time, the natural phenomenon in the sky above his head showed signs of fading and dispersing. Now, the natural phenomenon in the sky above his head could vaguely be seen to consist of 3 ancient horned dragon phantoms and 5,000 ancient flood dragon phantoms. In other words, when Duan Ling Tian just attacked, his total power was comparable to 3 ancient horned dragons and 5,000 ancient flood dragons. It should be noted that 2 months ago, on the Yin Yang sect's large airship, in front of Jin Sha, Duan Ling Tian, when going all out, only displayed the power of 2 ancient horned dragons and 8,000 ancient flood dragons. After 2 months, he increased his power by a full 7,000 ancient flood dragons. This was simply a miracle. At this moment, Feng Tianwu, Jin Sha, and Xiong Quan had also finished slaughtering all the surrounding berserk rats. With no more rats to kill, they immediately looked at Duan Ling Tian, and without exception, were attracted by the natural phenomenon in the sky above Duan Ling Tian's head that was about to dissipate. Gulp, gulp. Jin Sha and Xiong Quan both instinctively swallowed hard, their faces full of shock, their eyes filled with horror and disbelief. In 2 months, he increased his power by 7,000 ancient flood dragons? How did Master do it? Jin Sha was dumbfounded. Xiong Quan was much the same. Young Master, in just 2 months, his strength has reached such a level? He gained a full 7,000 more ancient flood dragons' power. Although Feng Tianwu didn't say anything, a few hints of surprise and shock appeared deep within her autumn eyes. Duan Ling Tian's progress astonished everyone who knew the before and after changes in his strength. Half a month ago, my cultivation, under the urging of the Nirvana pill's medicinal power, broke through further, directly reaching Martial Emperor Stage 3. Such an improvement increased my elemental energy by 1,000 ancient flood dragons' power. And with the amplification of a quasi-emperor grade spirit sword, that's an additional 2,000 ancient flood dragon's power. Recalling the improvements from half a month ago, Duan Ling Tian felt like he was dreaming. Before breaking through to the Martial Emperor stage, although the medicinal power of the Nirvana pill was astonishing, it required the medicinal power of spirit fruits to assist in its activation. But now, it no longer needed any activation. I broke through from Martial Emperor Stage 1 to Martial Emperor Stage 3. In just over half a year, Duan Ling Tian didn't know what to say about his progress in the past 6 months. Meanwhile, those around him, whether it was Tian Wu or Xiong Quan, were still at Martial Emperor Stage 1 and had yet to break through. The situations of Feng Tianwu and Xiong Quan are enough to prove that after the Martial Emperor realm, every step is like ascending to heaven. Every step is like ascending to heaven. It means that every step is as difficult as ascending to heaven. However, for Duan Ling Tian, who had previously taken a Nirvana pill, this was not the case. For him, breakthroughs after the Martial Emperor realm were as simple and easy as drinking plain water, which can be seen from the fact that he only took half a year to break through from Martial Emperor realm 1st level to Martial Emperor realm 3rd level. All of this is thanks to the Nirvana pill. Duan Ling Tian was well aware of this. Although his talent was high, reaching the limit that human martial artists in Cloud Continent could achieve, without the powerful medicinal effects of the Nirvana pill to assist him, his improvement would not have been so fast. Of course, if it were only the improvement of cultivation, it would not be enough for Duan Ling Tian to gain 7,000 ancient horn dragon power in just 2 months. The improvement in cultivation only gave him an additional 2,000 ancient horn dragon power before. The other 5,000 ancient horn dragon power came from elsewhere. Duan Ling Tian's strength comes from 4 aspects. Firstly, Yuan Force. Secondly, Quasi-Emperor Grade Spirit Sword. Thirdly, Fusion Profound Meaning. Fourthly, Sword Profound Meaning. In the past 2 months, the improvement in Yuan Force and the Quasi-Emperor Grade Spirit Sword accounted for 2,000 ancient horn dragon power. The Fusion Profound Meaning had not improved. That leaves only the Sword Profound Meaning. It was precisely because of the breakthrough in the Sword Profound Meaning that Duan Ling Tian suddenly gained 5,000 ancient horn dragon power. 2 months ago, the Sword Profound Meaning Duan Ling Tian comprehended was only 1st level Emperor Realm Sword Profound Meaning, equivalent to 2,000 ancient horn dragon power. And now, the Sword Profound Meaning has an additional 5,000 ancient horn dragon power compared to before. That is to say, the Sword Profound Meaning Duan Ling Tian currently comprehends is equivalent to 7,000 ancient horn dragon power, and the Sword Profound Meaning equivalent to 7,000 ancient horn dragon power is only the 6th level Emperor Realm Sword Profound Meaning. That's right, Duan Ling Tian had indeed comprehended the 6th level Emperor Realm Sword Profound Meaning. From 1st level Emperor Realm Sword Profound Meaning to comprehending 6th level Emperor Realm Sword Profound Meaning, he directly crossed 5 levels. The Sword Profound Meaning has improved so much, and in this process, I did not rely on Sword Profound Meaning fragments to comprehend and improve the Sword Profound Meaning. I relied entirely on the Sword Dao insights accumulated in my mind. As for the origin of the Sword Dao insights, it was nothing more than the character sword left by the Sword Saint Feng Qingyang. Within the character sword, there was obscure and difficult to understand information, and this information was precisely the Sword Dao insights, the Sword Dao insights left by the Sword Saint Feng Qingyang. According to Sword Saint Feng Qingyang, comprehending half of the Sword Dao insights he left behind allows one to roam freely in the Dao Martial Saint land. Now, I have only comprehended the superficial aspects, yet I have already elevated my Sword Profound Meaning to such a degree. Duan Ling Tian muttered to himself, and as he continued to murmur, his eyes suddenly lit up. It seems that the strength required to roam freely in the Dao Martial Saint land far exceeds my imagination. At this moment, Duan Ling Tian felt as if the 4 words Dao Martial Saint land were as heavy as Mount Tai, pressing down on him, making it difficult to breathe. Why am I thinking so much? I haven't even entered the Martial Emperor realm yet. Thinking of this, Duan Ling Tian shook his head and gave a self-deprecating smile. No matter what, the reason for such a significant improvement in his strength this time was still thanks to the insights left by the Sword Saint Feng Qingyang. He was sincerely grateful to the person who called himself Sword Saint. Heavenly Pearl. After regaining his composure, Duan Lingtian's eyes lit up, and he finally remembered his purpose this time. He immediately took the spatial rings from the two imperial members of the Violent Vole clan, performed a blood bond, and then carefully searched inside them. However, he did not find any trace of the Heavenly Pearl inside. Master, are you looking for the Heavenly Pearl? Jin Sha saw Duan Lingtian's actions and his furrowed brows, and he immediately guessed what Duan Lingtian was thinking. They didn't have it on them. Duan Lingtian said, "It should be in their ancestral temple." Jin Sha said, "Ancestral temple." Duan Lingtian was stunned. They are a group of demonic beasts, and they have an ancestral temple? In Duan Lingtian's view, an ancestral temple was generally something only human families had, used to commemorate and remember family ancestors, with extraordinary significance. He never expected that the Violent Vole clan also had an ancestral temple. Soon, under Jin Sha's lead, Duan Lingtian arrived at the ancestral temple of the Violent Vole clan. The ancestral temple was also made of pure wood, but it was extremely exquisite, with many spirit tablets placed inside, on which names were carved, all of which were extremely unfamiliar to Duan Lingtian. But to Jin Sha, they were extremely familiar. Boom! Jin Sha raised his hand and destroyed a spirit tablet on the far right. As he struck, his face was covered in frost, and his eyes gleamed with murderous intent, as if he wanted to devour someone. "Is that the Violent Vole that killed your parents?" Duan Lingtian asked. "Yes." Jin Sha took a deep breath, and after calming down, he looked at Duan Lingtian and apologized. "Master, I lost my composure." "There's nothing to lose composure about." Duan Lingtian shook his head and said, "If I were you, I might even tear down the entire ancestral temple of this Violent Vole clan." As he said this, Duan Lingtian saw Jin Sha's eyes light up, as if he had gained some enlightenment from his reminder. "If you want to demolish it, wait until I find the Heavenly Pearl." Duan Lingtian was really afraid that this guy would directly demolish the ancestral temple of the Violent Vole clan. "Yes, master," Jin Sha hastily replied. Immediately after, Duan Lingtian and the four of them began to search within the ancestral temple of the Violent Vole clan. After searching for a long time, they found nothing. "What's going on?" Jin Sha frowned. "I heard those two old guys say before, the Heavenly Pearl has always been kept in their clan's ancestral temple. Why can't we find it? Pay more attention to the surroundings and those spirit tablets. Maybe there's some hidden mechanism." Duan Lingtian reminded them. Prompted by Duan Lingtian, the four of them searched together for another half an hour and finally made a discovery. "Young master, look over here." Xiong Quan's voice came, attracting Duan Lingtian's attention. Upon reaching Xiong Quan's side, Duan Lingtian followed the direction Xiong Quan pointed and immediately saw a loose wooden board in a corner of the ancestral temple, which seemed to be detachable. Without hesitation, Duan Lingtian raised his hand and removed the wooden board. Clang! As he removed it, an unowned spatial ring fell out. Could it be that the Heavenly Pearl is inside? As he thought of this, Duan Lingtian's breathing became heavy, and the hand holding the spatial ring felt as heavy as Mount Tai. Taking a deep breath and calming himself, Duan Lingtian performed a blood bond on the spatial ring under the watchful eyes of Xiong Quan and the other two. After performing the blood bond on the spatial ring, Duan Lingtian immediately looked inside. He saw that the storage space inside the spatial ring was empty, with only a single pearl in a corner standing out, shimmering with 5 different colored lights. The 5 colors were cyan, red, blue, earth yellow, purple. These were precisely the colors of the 5 forces of nature, corresponding to wind, fire, water, earth, thunder. The 5 different colored lights shimmering within the pearl looked almost identical to the fusion profound meaning that Duan Lingtian had mastered, both being colorful powers that corresponded to each other. Heavenly Pearl. Without needing to search the memories of the reincarnation Martial Emperor again, Duan Lingtian could almost 100% confirm that this was the Heavenly Pearl, the legendary Heavenly Pearl. As for the power accumulated within it, it was the purest natural power between heaven and earth. Of course, it could now also be called Heavenly Pearl power. For a moment, Duan Lingtian's face was filled with excitement, and even his body trembled slightly due to the excitement. Without any hesitation, Duan Lingtian, with a thought, took out the Heavenly Pearl and held it in his hand still trembling. As the heavenly pearl entered his hand, a cool sensation spread. Soon, Duan Lingtian's expression changed, as he discovered that the power emanating from within the heavenly pearl had changed. Sharp, rampant, gentle, profound, violent. 5 different types of power gradually surged into his body, ultimately causing him to instinctively communicate and mobilize his fusion profound meaning, allowing it to meet with them. Indeed, soon, Duan Lingtian discovered that as soon as the fusion profound meaning touched the heavenly pearl power, extending from within the heavenly pearl, it perfectly merged with it. It was like water and milk blending. Everything was so natural. At the same time, Duan Lingtian's pupils suddenly constricted. At this moment, he could vaguely feel his fusion profound meaning undergoing subtle changes, seemingly having gained some improvement. Although this slight improvement was still some distance from a breakthrough, Duan Lingtian could clearly feel it. This instant improvement feels like more than what I gained from comprehending and improving with the 3 natural profound meaning fragments over the past 2 months. Duan Lingtian was secretly astonished, feeling as if he had wasted the past 20-plus days comprehending those 3 natural profound meaning fragments. As expected of the heavenly pearl, perhaps, by the time I reach the Yin-Yang sect stronghold, it can help me achieve a breakthrough in my fusion profound meaning. At that time, my strength will advance to another level. Duan Lingtian was fantasizing. Of course, this might not necessarily be a dream. Judging by the heavenly pearl power currently extending from the heavenly pearl, it's not impossible for it to help him elevate his fusion profound meaning to another level in a short period of time. Of course, everything still needs to wait for some time to know the result. Is this the heavenly pearl? At this moment, both Feng Tianwu and Xiong Quan had recovered from the shock that Duan Lingtian's current strength had brought them, and their gazes fell one by one on the heavenly pearl in Duan Lingtian's hand. Even Jin Sha was now attracted by the heavenly pearl in Duan Lingtian's hand. Although he had heard of the heavenly pearl in the past, it was only through hearsay. This was the first time in his life he had seen a real heavenly pearl, and it was so close to him, within reach. Of course, he dared not touch it. He didn't want his master to misunderstand. Boom, 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 boom. A series of loud bangs rang out as a grand wooden building collapsed, kicking up a cloud of dust. Outside, 3 people were waiting in the distance. In front of the collapsed building stood a figure. In his hand, he held a 3-foot green edge, which faintly emitted waves of sharp qi. The collapsed building was his masterpiece. It's all over. After a long while, the person holding the 3-foot green edge sighed, his weathered voice filled with relief. Father, mother, clansman, Golden Fiend has avenged you. After a moment, he put away the 3-foot green edge, knelt in the air, and kowtowed 3 times toward the northwest before finally standing up again. This person was an old man, wearing a gold robe, tall and majestic. It was indeed Golden Fiend. The building he had destroyed was the ancestral hall of the violent mixed-hair rat clan. I, Golden Fiend, swear by the 99 Thunder Tribulation. From this day forward, I will sincerely follow my master Duan Lingtian. If I dare to harbor any secondary motives, I shall be struck down by lightning punishment and die without a burial place. Soon, Golden Fiend pricked his finger and made an inviolable oath. His wish was fulfilled. It was time to fulfill his promise. Boom, boom, boom. 9 claps of thunder descended from the horizon, responding to Golden Fiend's oath. Once this oath was made, it meant that Golden Fiend would no longer live only for himself. The lightning punishment did not descend. It seems Golden Fiend is indeed sincere about following young master this time. After a while, seeing no trace of lightning punishment, Xiong Quan immediately looked at Duan Lingtian. Congratulations, young master, on gaining a fierce general. Duan Lingtian nodded faintly. Although his expression didn't change much, a few glints of light flickered deep within his gaze. Let's go. We still have to make our way to the Yin-Yang sect. After Duan Lingtian spoke to Golden Fiend, he raised his hand, and surging power swept out, instantly enveloping Feng Tianwu, Xiong Quan, and Golden Fiend. Then, by his own strength, he led the 3 of them flying rapidly toward the location of the Yin-Yang sect. Here, little Fair, I'm coming. Duan Lingtian looked toward the direction of the Yin-Yang sect station, his gaze sharp as he murmured in his heart. Although he was flying with Feng Tianwu and the others, Duan Lingtian could still circulate the ninth transformation of the nine dragons war venerable art, the divine dragon transformation, to cultivate, and his speed of cultivation was not slow at all. In addition, he held a pearl shimmering with five-colored luster in his hand, the heavenly pearl. Now he was absorbing the power of the heavenly pearl at all times, and his fusion profundity, formed by the fusion of 5 types of Emperor Realm natural profound truths, was improving at an extremely fast pace. Furthermore, Duan Lingtian did not neglect the insights into the Tao of the sword originating from the sword character in his mind, comprehending them with all his heart. He had already tasted the sweetness of it. In just 2 months, relying on the Tao of the sword insights contained in the sword character left by the sword Saint Feng Qingyang, his first-level Emperor Realm sword profundity had advanced to the 6th-level Emperor Realm sword profundity in one fell swoop. In 2 months, he had crossed 5 levels. If this were told to others, no one would likely believe it, because it was simply too outrageous. Duan Lingtian asked himself, if it were him hearing that someone else had raised their Emperor Realm profundity by 5 levels in 2 months, he wouldn't believe it either. However, now that it was happening to him, he had no choice but to believe it. His strength had truly undergone earth-shaking changes during these 2 months. With my current strength, even if I encounter an ordinary Martial Emperor Realm 7th-level expert of the Yin-Yang sect, I won't be afraid. However, as for that Yang Peak Master, I'm afraid I'm not his match yet. At this thought, Duan Lingtian's face darkened. The Yang Peak Master, an expert standing at the peak of the first-rate faction, Yin-Yang sect, was likely not someone he could compare to yet. What exactly is on his mind? Why is he in such a hurry to go to that Yin-Yang sect? Feng Tianwu clearly saw Duan Lingtian's darkened expression. Her heart skipped a beat, and her autumn eyes were filled with confusion and bewilderment. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. 4 figures tore through the air, heading all the way to the Yin-Yang sect. Yin-Yang sect, Yang Peak. Halfway up the mountain near the summit, there was a vast stone platform. On the stone platform stood a continuous complex of buildings, hidden behind the clouds and mist, making it difficult to see clearly from the outside. The mist would occasionally disperse, and only then could the outline of the buildings be seen. They were individual estates, neatly arranged and pleasant to look at. Whoosh, whoosh. Suddenly, 2 figures streaked from the horizon and descended toward the building complex. In front was a slender woman in white. She possessed peerless beauty, yet she appeared somewhat youthful and innocent, a youthfulness that seemed as if it would never fade with the passing of time. However, the woman in white's current expression was not very good. Her face was gloomy, as if she were burdened with heavy thoughts. Junior Sister Kier, once you marry me, I will definitely treat you well. Following behind the woman in white was a young man wearing a white robe embroidered with red flames. He was about 35 years old, and his brows were filled with frivolity. He was clearly a profligate young master. Now, he was shamelessly pursuing the woman in white. In a short while, he was only a step away from her. Swish! At that moment, the woman in white raised her hand, and a 3-foot green edge emitting a sharp aura appeared in it. Stay away from me. Otherwise, even if you are the son of the Yang Peak Master, I will kill you. At the same time, a trace of cold sword intent rose from her body. Above her in the void, the power of heaven and earth surged, eventually converging into a heaven and earth phenomenon. Several thousand ancient horned dragon phantoms wound down, looking lifelike. The young man's face darkened, and for a moment, he didn't dare to approach the woman in white again, because he knew her strength was greater than his. Killing him would not be difficult for her. Bitch, once you marry me, let's see how long you can keep up this act of a chaste and virtuous woman. Cold light flickered in the young man's eyes as he cursed inwardly. However, he wasn't worried that the woman in white before him would actually strike him, because he held her weak point in his hands. That weak point was also the biggest trump card forcing her to marry him. In another month, you will be my woman, pleasuring me beneath me, unless you want your good sister Li Fei to die. The young man looked at the woman in white, a lewd luster appearing in his eyes, and his heart grew even more smug. A moment later, the woman in white landed in front of an estate and was, without surprise, blocked by an old man. Get out of the way. The woman in white's autumn eyes narrowed as she shouted lightly, her voice filled with a hint of anger. Young master. However, the old man ignored her and instead bowed respectfully to the young man following behind her, his words full of humility. "Take her to see Li Fei." The young man nodded faintly and said to the old man, "Yes." The old man responded respectfully. Although he was an elder of the Yin-Yang sect and a martial emperor realm third-level existence, he did not dare to be the slightest bit negligent toward the young man before him, simply because the young man before him was the son of the Yang Peak Master. The Yang Peak Master had saved his life several times and was his great benefactor. If the Yang Peak Master wanted to leave the Yin-Yang sect, or even betray it, he would follow without hesitation. In his heart, he had long since positioned himself as the Yang Peak Master's family retainer. A moment later, the old man led the woman in white into the estate. The young man stood outside the estate, not worried that the woman in white would escape. He believed in the old man's strength. Moreover, besides the old man just now, his father had sent 2 other experts to hide on both sides of this estate, so he was very at ease. To think she actually has a fiancé, and even shares a husband with Li Fei. Once she becomes my woman, I will definitely find a way to pry the details of that man out of her mouth. The young man snorted coldly, murmuring word by word. If that man doesn't die, he will be a thorn in my side. Once he's dead, the thorn will be gone. As he finished murmuring, a cold, killing intent revealed itself in the young man's eyes, like a beast ready to devour someone. Inside the estate, the old man led the woman in white to the front courtyard. The front courtyard was a large garden, filled with flowers, plants, and trees, with a pavilion standing in the center. Inside the pavilion, another woman in white sat cross-legged, her entire aura seemingly melting into the heaven and earth. This woman in white also possessed a peerless beauty capable of toppling nations. However, compared to the youthful innocence of the woman in white who had just entered, her face was filled with an enchanting allure, enough to make any man's heart race. "Sister Fair." The woman in white who had just entered stood outside the pavilion and called out softly. Suddenly, the woman in white inside the pavilion opened her eyes. Her enchanting eyes flashed, and a look of surprise and excitement appeared on her beautiful face. "Sister Kier." A moment later, the 2 women in white moved together, throwing themselves into each other's arms like 2 white butterflies, holding each other's hands and looking each other up and down. "Sister Kier, you've grown thin." The woman in white with the enchanting allure said with a face full of heartache. "Sister Fair, you've grown thin too." Looking at the woman in white before her, Kier's youthful face was suddenly streaked with 2 tear tracks. Her pitiful appearance made one feel even more heartache for her. "Sister Kier, don't cry. If the bad guy knew you were like this, who knows how much his heart would ache." Li Fei comforted her softly, but as she spoke, her own autumn eyes also turned red. "Sister Fair, I miss young Master so much. I don't know how young Master is doing now, or if he's still at the 7-Star Sword sect." Kier's crying voice was punctuated by a few sobs, and an elegant purple figure appeared in her mind, refusing to fade for a long time. "Sister Kier, there's only 1 month left. If senior sister still hasn't contacted the Peak Master and Master, I'm saying if. Are you ready?" Li Fei's autumn eyes flashed, her expression tightening as she asked in a heavy voice. "Sister Fair, there's no need to prepare for that. I would rather die than betray young Master." Kier's face was full of decisiveness. "I will stay with you." Li Fei smiled, but her smile carried a hint of desolation. Her greatest regret was not being able to see that bad guy who haunted her dreams one last time before dying. However, thinking of the beautiful past she shared with that bad guy, she felt her life had no regrets. In a daze, Li Fei reminisced about the past. Back then, at the Li family of Aurora City, she met that bad guy for the first time. He had sized her up unscrupulously, leaving a terrible first impression. But gradually, as she got to know that bad guy better, she realized he wasn't as bad as she had imagined. Unknowingly, the bad guy's figure entered her heart and could never be dispelled. What I regret most now is not being more determined to leave with Peak Master Qinxiang back then. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been separated from the bad guy for so many years, only to end up facing life and death like this. Li Fei sighed softly, then looked at Kier and said apologetically, "Sister Kier, I'm sorry. I made the wrong choice back then." "Sister Fair, don't say that. You weren't wrong. Back then, you chose to stay because you wanted to get better cultivate resources in the Yin-Yang sect to improve your strength as quickly as possible to help the young master." Kier shook her head and said, "Kier doesn't regret choosing to leave with you. because this is what I should do for the young master. It's just a pity that even though we've made a breakthrough to the Martial Emperor realm now, it's still useless. We're still like fish on a chopping block, at the mercy of others. Toward the end, Kier's tone was filled with helplessness, a deep, soul-wrenching helplessness. Sister Kier, these past few months have been hard on you, Li Fei said heart-achingly. If senior sister hadn't told me to wait, I would never have lived on like this, and I wouldn't have dragged you into this, Sister Fair. Kier's voice choked up. Silly girl, between us, there's no such thing as being dragged into anything. I only hate that I'm too weak to help you. Li Fei shook her head. Who is it? Just as Li Fei and Kier were expressing their desolation, the old man standing in the distance monitoring them suddenly changed expression. He looked up at the sky and shouted. Swoosh. Following the old man's shout, a piercing whistling sound of wind approached, accompanied by a white figure. In the blink of an eye, it landed in the front courtyard of the large manor. The white figure landed and revealed her true appearance. It was a woman in white with a face as exquisite as carved jade. In terms of beauty, she could rival Kier and Li Fei. However, unlike the two women, this woman in white's face seemed to be perpetually shrouded in frost, emitting an icy aura that kept people at a distance. Senior sister, startled by the old man's shout, Kier and Li Fei also saw the woman in white who had landed in a hurry, and their eyes suddenly lit up. This senior sister was their eldest senior sister, Yang Shui, who shared the same master. To them, in the Yin-Yang sect, besides their master, they were only close to this senior sister Shui, treating her like a real sister. Originally, when they were first coerced by the Yang Peak master, they wanted to end their lives, but they were stopped by senior sister Shui. She said she would find the Yin Peak master, who was in secluded cultivate, and their master to save them. Only then did they choose to endure for the time being. Seeing senior sister Shui appear now, they were somewhat stunned. Could it be that senior sister had brought their Yin Peak master or their master? However, they looked toward the horizon but didn't see a second figure. Go! Before Kier and Li Fei could react, Yang Shui looked at them and gave a low shout. Swoosh! Swoosh! Kier and Li Fei had unconditional trust in senior sister Shui. Without even asking, they immediately flew out. After reaching senior sister Shui, they all stepped into the air. Swoosh! Yang Shui followed them, stepping into the air. Yang Shui, how dare you ruin my plans? Stop them. Yang Shui's arrival had caused a great commotion, also alerting the son of the Yang Peak master who was guarding outside the manor. He rushed in from outside and, seeing the scene, shouted in frustration. Yes, at his command, the old man who had brought Kier in earlier shot out like a cannonball, heading straight for Yang Shui, Kier, and Li Fei. Stay! Seeing the three women getting closer, the old man roared and suddenly attacked. As the old man attacked, two more figures shot out from the shadows on both sides of the manor. Like the old man, their target was the three women, clearly being on the old man's side. Including the old man, the three of them attacked Yang Shui, Kier, and Li Fei, who were trying to escape. Humph! A cold snort echoed down, accompanied by overwhelming palm prints falling like a rain of palms. It was Yang Shui who snorted coldly. Her white clothes fluttered, and a pair of spiritual artifact gloves appeared out of thin air on her fair wrists extending from her sleeves. She unleashed thunderous attacks on the three pursuers, Heaven and Earth Net Palm. This martial skill was a famous heaven-grade high-rank offensive martial skill in Yin Peak, and the strongest palm technique in the Yin-Yang sect. Executed by Yang Shui, it seemed to carry world-shaking power. Boom, 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 boom. The overwhelming palm prints fell, making the three pursuers somewhat disheveled. They took out their spiritual artifacts and used all their means, barely managing to crush the cascading palm prints. Immediately after, the three of them, with cold light in their eyes, locked onto Yang Shui, the number one person among the younger generation of Yin Peak. Today, I shall witness your strength. The old man roared and was the first to attack Yang Shui. People of Yin Peak dare to act presumptuously in our Yang Peak. You're looking for death. The other two, whose strength was no less than the old man's, also joined him in attacking Yang Shui. Senior sister, be careful. Seeing this, Kier and Li Fei's expressions changed drastically. They immediately took out their spiritual artifacts from their storage rings, wanting to help Yang Shui deal with the three men. You go first. I can handle them. Yang Shui immediately stopped Kier and Li Fei, warning them with a low shout. As soon as she finished speaking, she moved again. Her white clothes fluttered as she met the three people rushing toward her. 3 Martial Emperor Realm 3rd Level Martial Artists. 3 Martial Emperor Realm 3rd Level Martial Artists. Their strengths nearly identical. They had comprehended one type of 3rd Level Emperor Realm Profound Truth and 2 types of 9th Level Void Transformation Intent Realm. The spiritual artifacts in their hands were all 2nd-grade spirit artifacts. The 3 of them attacked, each channeling the power of heaven and earth, which converged into one ancient azure dragon phantom and over 3,000 ancient horned dragon phantoms. Their aura was like a rainbow as they charged forward to kill. Kier and Li Fei, who had been stopped by Yang Shue's shout, did not leave. Today's events were entirely because of them. If anything happened to their senior sister because of this, they would regret it for the rest of their lives and never find peace. Senior sister. Now, seeing 3 Martial Emperor Realm 3rd Level Martial Artists attacking together with all their might to deal with Yang Shui, their faces changed drastically, and they cried out in alarm. As far as they knew, their senior sister was only at the Martial Emperor Realm 3rd Level, and her profound truth and concept were not much stronger than those of these 3. In their view, facing the joint attack of these 3, their senior sister was in grave danger. For a moment, the 2 women didn't dare to hesitate. They hurriedly attacked, wanting to stop the 3 men who were charging at their senior sister. Even if they only stopped one person, they could help share the pressure for their senior sister. At this moment, they completely disregarded their own lives. They had only one thought in their minds. Senior sister must not come to harm. However, soon, their figures paused in midair. Incredible looks appeared on their beautiful faces, followed by joy. Facing the joint attack of the 3 Martial Emperor Realm 3rd Level Martial Artists, Yang Shui met them without the slightest fear. Boom! With a wave of her hand, Yang Shui struck out with a palm. Vast power surged, converging into a mountain-like palm print. At the same time, in the void realm above Yang Shui's head, nearly 4,000 more ancient horned dragon phantoms appeared, lifelike and winding down with a rainbow-like aura. Senior sister, did she have a breakthrough? Kier and Li Fei's faces were filled with excitement. They seemed to have seen the dawn of their escape. The power of the ancient azure dragon plus nearly 7,000 ancient horned dragon phantoms worth of power poured out without reservation, turning into a giant palm print that crashed down on the 3 men. Not good. She was hiding her strength just now. Damn it. Instantly, the 3 men rushing toward Yang Shui all changed expression, their eyes filled with terror and their voices with urgency. Flee. The same thought immediately popped into their minds. However, before they could act on it, the giant palm print had already crashed down on them. The power of the ancient azure dragon plus nearly 7,000 ancient horned dragon phantoms worth of power completely enveloped them. Boom. In an instant, the 3 men who had been charging aggressively at Yang Shui were turned to ash, completely disappearing from this world. Yang Shui, how dare you kill my father's men? At this time, the son of the Yang Peak Master, that profligate young master, also stepped into the air. Seeing the 3 being killed by Yang Shui, his face became extremely ugly. However, Yang Shui ignored him and turned to look at Kier and Li Fei. Swoosh, swoosh. At the same time, 2 gentle forces extended from her raised hand, enveloping Kier and Li Fei, surrounding them. Just as she was about to take Kier and Li Fei away, Yang Shui, you have some nerve. A shout like a clap of thunder seemed to come from all directions, bringing a strong sense of pressure. Hearing this voice, Yang Shui's expression changed drastically. Not just her, Kier and Li Fei also changed expression. Father, on the other hand, the profligate young master's eyes lit up, as if he had seen a savior, and he was extremely excited. There was only one person he could call father. Yang Peak Master, Yang Hong. Whoosh. As if a gust of wind had swept by, a burly young man in fiery red robes blocked the path of the 3 women. The stout young man's face was covered in whiskers, his ash-gray long hair fluttering like pale flames leaping in the air. His tiger-like brows gave him an air of authority even when he wasn't angry. Beneath those brows, his eyes calmly studied the 3 women, as though they meant nothing to him. Father, at that moment, the profligate young master who had followed Kier here flew up to stand beside the burly young man, the Yang Peak Master of the Yin-Yang sect, Yang Hong. Feier, looking at the young man beside him, Yang Hong's eyes brimmed with affection. This was his son, his only son, Yang Fei. Father, I'm taking her as my wife today. Yang Fei pointed straight at Kier, lust blazing in his eyes. I'm done waiting. Don't worry. Yang Hong smiled indulgently. Today she'll marry you, but you'd best show some backbone so your old man can hold a grandchild soon. Yes, father. With Yang Hong's promise, Yang Fei nodded excitedly. Here, however, flashed a cold light in her autumn-bright eyes at their words. I'd rather die than betray my young master. Give up the thought. If you won't marry me, I'll have my father kill Li Fei. Yang Fei grinned, turning first to look at Li Fei as if victory were already his. Li Fei's pretty face darkened, killing intent flickering in her eyes. Intent sharp enough to tear Yang Fei to pieces. She ignored him. Her mind was made up. She would rather die than let anyone use her to threaten her sister Kier. Peak Master Yang Hong. At that moment Yang Shui spoke. She faced Yang Hong, frost coating her features as she said slowly, word by word. Forcing us Peak disciples like this. Aren't you afraid our Peak Master and our master will settle accounts with you once they emerge? Ha ha ha. Before her voice had faded, Yang Hong burst into laughter, wild and unrestrained. You mean your Peak Master and your master? You think the reason you couldn't reach them all those times you snuck into the Forbidden Land was because they didn't hear you? Naive. Yang Hong swept her a disdainful glance. On the very second day of their closed-door death cultivation, I paid a visit to the Peak Forbidden Land. I have to admit, they're strong, even badly wounded. Together they lasted 30 moves against me. I still remember that before your 3 masters died, they knelt and begged me to spare you. A miserable sight. Tsk, tisk. He chuckled at the memory. Master. As the words fell, Yang Shui, Kier, and Li Fei paled, crying out in grief, tears streaming like rain. Their master was dead, killed by Yang Hong, and in her last moments, she had still worried about them. Their hearts shook violently. Scenes of days with their master flashed before their eyes. Why did you do it? Li Fei's eyes seemed to stain red with hatred as she stared at Yang Hong, her voice icy. Yang Shui and Kier glared at him with the same hatred. Why? Yang Hong smiled, a brilliant smile. Good question. The Yang sect has existed for thousands of years with Peak and Yang Peak side by side. Yet these past centuries, outsiders speak only of the Peak Master and Yang Peak Master. They never mention a sect master. For hundreds of years the sect has had no sect master. But now it's different. With your Peak Master dead, no one can stand equal to me. I will become the first sect master the Yang sect has seen in centuries. His face filled with delight, even a touch of madness. Here, Feier, while Yang Hong is off guard, I'll freeze him. Run as fast as you can. Before he breaks free, leave Yang Peak and hide. Yang Shui's gaze sharpened. Having made her decision, she sent her voice directly into Kier's and Li Fei's ears with Yuan power sound condensation. Freeze. Senior sister, we go together or not at all. Senior sister, I won't abandon you. Hearing Yang Shui's silent words, Kier and Li Fei paled. They knew exactly what their senior sister meant by freeze. As an anomaly, Yang Shui's innate divine ability allowed her to seal an area in ice and bind everyone within it for a short time. But to bind a powerhouse like Yang Hong, she would have to burn her own life force to drive that divine ability. In other words, their senior sister intended to trade her life to open an escape route for them. The change in Kier's and Li Fei's expressions, seen by Yang Hong and his son, was taken merely as fear, so the two men paid it no further heed. Kier, Feier, listen to me. If you don't leave, we'll all die here today. Then there will be no one left to avenge Master. Yang Shui used Yuan power sound condensation again, her tone stern. Get out of here and survive. With your talent, as long as you live, you'll be able to avenge senior sister and master in the future. Hearing Yang Shui's Yuan power sound condensation, Kier and Li Fei fell silent. It was the first time they had heard their senior sister speak so harshly, yet they knew she was right. Even if not for themselves, they had to survive for master and senior sister. For a moment, Kier and Li Fei exchanged glances, each seeing sorrow and resolve in the other's autumn-bright eyes. Go! A cold, sharp shout exploded like thunder, ringing in Kier and Li Fei's ears. Ready for it. Kier and Li Fei shot out like twin bolts of lightning, streaking across the sky toward the far side of Yang Peak. Once past it, they could vanish into the vast, rugged mountains. Once hidden in those hills, their chances of survival would be high. Yang Hong, the Yang Peak Master, was also startled by Yang Shui's cry. His face darkened as he instantly spotted the two fleeing silhouettes. Father, catch them! Yang Fei reacted as well, urging him on. Yet just as Yang Hong was about to give chase, he felt an icy aura surge toward him and his son, covering the heavens and earth. In an instant, the very air seemed frozen. He could feel a piercing cold trying to turn him into an ice statue. Fire, the chill piercing his body, didn't bother Yang Hong. With a wave of his hand, he even drove the cold out of his son. Yang Shui, I didn't expect you to hide so deeply and even comprehend the profound truth of ice. Holding his son with one arm, Yang Hong raised his other hand, cold eyes locking on Yang Shui as he prepared to blast her with a palm, so he could pursue the two girls. But soon his expression changed again. The surrounding cold grew stronger, turning into a thick layer of solid ice that trapped him and his son inside. Boom! The palm he struck in fury left only faint cracks on the ice. Uffed! He saw Yang Shui outside pale and spit a mouthful of blood as his palm landed. Then, deathly pale but resolute, Yang Shui hovered in the air, swaying as if barely holding on. Moments passed. Her smooth black hair began turning white. At this rate, it would all be snow white soon, turning white in an instant. Father, hurry, they're getting away. When Yang Fei saw the two figures about to disappear beyond Yang Peak, his face paled, and he anxiously urged his father. She's burning her own life force. This isn't the profound truth of ice. It's an innate divine ability. Realizing this, Yang Hong's face changed. So Yang Shui truly is an anomaly. In the past he'd heard she was an anomaly, but had never been sure, for he'd never seen her use her innate divine ability. Today he witnessed it, a divine ability fueled by her very life. A fiery great blade appeared in his hand, its blade light flaring as he mustered all his strength to hack through the surrounding ice. He had to break free and chase the fleeing women. Whoom! His blade light surged, making him seem like a living saber that slashed fiercely at the ice with godlike force. Boom! A savage crack appeared, spreading until it slowed and stopped. Impossible. Seeing that even his full-strength blade hadn't shattered the ice, Yang Hong's face changed. Father, they've escaped. They've escaped. Quick! Yang Fei, watching the two figures vanish beyond Yang Peak, shouted in panic. Let's see how many more blades you can block. Spotting Yang Shui outside, still hovering and coughing blood, her hair almost fully white, Yang Hong's eyes blazed with killing intent as he struck again. To be restrained by a martial Emperor Realm 4th level martial artist was a great humiliation. A humiliation that must be washed away with blood. Whoom, whoom, whoom. Finally, after 3 blades, a thunderous crash rang out, and Yang Hong shattered the ice around him. Wah! Almost the instant the solid ice broke, Yang Shui, whose long black hair had turned white, spat out a mouthful of clotted blood, her body becoming increasingly unsteady. Yang Shui's exquisitely beautiful face was now as pale as paper, but it held a faint smile. She had succeeded. She had bought time for her 2 junior sisters to escape. Here, Fei, you must live well. Yang Shui murmured softly. Humph. Following a cold snort, a blade light tore through the air, shooting directly toward Yang Shui. Before Yang Shui could react, it pierced straight through her body. Yang Shui perished beautifully, falling from the sky. Dad, hurry and chase those 2 sluts. Don't let them escape. Yang Fei urged Yang Hong. MHM. Yang Hong nodded, put away the blade in his hand, and prepared to take his son to chase the 2 female disciples from Yin Peak who had fled. Although some time had been wasted, he believed those 2 female disciples had not escaped far. If he went after them now, he was absolutely certain he could catch them. Whoosh! Instantly, Yang Hong took Yang Fei and flew out, pursuing the direction Kier and Li Fei had fled. Yang Peak Master, roll out here. Just as Yang Hong and Yang Fei set off, a thunderous voice echoed from the horizon, spreading across the entire Yang Peak and causing a commotion throughout the area. Who was that? So audacious. Immediately, many Yang Peak elders and disciples left their residences and looked up at the sky. Swish! Just as many people on Yang Peak were looking up at the sky, they heard a piercing sword whistle coming from the horizon. Soon, they clearly saw a massive 5-colored sword light appear from behind the clouds. The 5-colored sword light descended from the horizon, fiercely aimed directly at their Yang Peak. This is bad. Immediately, many people felt an ominous premonition, and their expressions changed drastically. Boom! Finally, the 5-colored sword light that appeared on the horizon struck the summit of Yang Peak. As it plunged into the peak, the entire Yang Peak began to tremble, shaking the mountains and earth as if a massive earthquake had struck. Boom! 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 Boom, boom. On Yang Peak, rocks continuously tumbled down. Many heart-wrenching screams could be heard, as numerous people were injured by the falling debris. Naturally, more people took flight and left Yang Peak. Boom. Soon, another deafening crash came. The massive five-colored sword light had pierced through the body of Yang Peak, causing the hot magma accumulated inside to erupt. Rolling magma spewed out from the cracked summit of Yang Peak, raining down in all directions, as if a shower of fire had begun. Instantly, Yang Peak, which was originally a dormant volcano, turned into an active volcano. It's over. Yang Peak is finished. Many Yang Peak disciples standing high up in the distance looked at Yang Peak, which was instantly engulfed by magma, their eyes filled with despair. Who exactly did this? To actually destroy our Yang Peak. No matter who he is not someone we can contend with. Now, we can only hope that the Peak Master, the two Vice Peak Masters, and the Protector Elder can seek justice for our Yang Peak. Destroying our Yang Peak is equivalent to offending the entire Yin Yang sect. No matter who it is, they must pay the price. Many Yang Peak disciples roared angrily. With this volcanic eruption, their place of cultivation was completely ruined. Who is it? Originally, when Yang Hong heard someone tell him to roll out, he paid no attention and continued rushing in the direction the two female disciples from Yin Peak had fled with his son. However, the sword whistle and the earth-shattering crash from behind, along with the heart-wrenching screams, instantly gave him an ominous feeling. When he subconsciously turned around, he discovered that Yang Peak, where he had lived for most of his life, had completely turned into an ocean of fire. The summit of Yang Peak continuously spewed out scorching magma, making the entire Yang Peak seem as though it was raining fire. Dad, what is happening? Yang Fei was completely stunned by the scene before his eyes. Who is it? How dare they destroy my Yang Peak? Yang Hong was enraged, completely enraged. He was the Yang Peak Master, and soon he would become the Yin Yang sect master. Seeing the base of the sect he was about to control destroyed like this, how could he tolerate it? Whoosh! Without any hesitation, Yang Hong let go of Yang Fei, stepped into the air alone, and instantly transformed into a blade, shooting straight toward the sky. No matter who you are, for destroying my Yang Peak, I will certainly tear you into 10,000 pieces. Along the way, Yang Hong gritted his teeth and swore fiercely. It seems I can only wait for Dad to kill that person before going to find those two sluts again. Yang Fei reluctantly glanced at the complex terrain of the mountains below, then also stepped into the air and followed the direction Yang Hong had left, wanting to join the excitement. I also want to see who exactly dared to not only provoke my dad, but also destroy Yang Peak. Daring to be an enemy of our Yin Yang sect, he will certainly die without a burial place today. A cold light flashed in Yang Fei's eyes as he muttered softly, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Above the summit of Yang Peak, which was continuously spewing magma, three figures appeared successively, two old men and one middle-aged man. Now, without exception, blazing fury appeared on their faces. Whoosh! Soon, Yang Hong also arrived at the summit of Yang Peak. Peak Master, seeing Yang Hong, one of the old men and the middle-aged man greeted him proactively. They were both Yang Peak Vice Peak Masters, and in terms of status and strength, they were both below the Peak Master standing before them. As for the remaining old man, he was the Yang Peak Protector Elder. In terms of strength, he was not inferior to the Yang Peak Master, Yang Hong, and in terms of seniority, he was a generation above Yang Hong. Junior Martial Uncle. After Yang Hong nodded to the two Vice Peak Masters, he looked at the Yang Peak Protector Elder. The latter nodded faintly. At the same time, he raised an eyebrow, his expression sinking. As if sensing something, he suddenly looked up at the high sky ahead. Instantly, Yang Hong and the other two Yang Peak Vice Peak Masters also looked over. In the distance, four figures appeared before their eyes. Among the four, a youth in purple robes and a woman in red led the group. The youth in purple robes walked at the front, a hint of coldness mixed between his brows. His eyes flashed with chilling light, ready to devour others. The youth in purple robes looked very young, at most around 25 years old. The woman in red beside the youth in purple robes possessed an exquisitely beautiful face capable of toppling kingdoms, but her face seemed covered in a layer of frost, radiating a cold aura that kept people thousands of miles away. This woman in red looked to be in her early 20s, even younger than the youth in purple robes. Trailing behind the youth in purple robes and the woman in red were a middle-aged man dressed in plain robes and a tall old man dressed in golden robes. Who are you people? Was that sword strike that destroyed our Yang Peak delivered by you? Yang Hong stared at the four people before him, his eyes flashing sharply as he asked in a deep voice. Just as the two Yang Peak Vice Peak Masters and the Protector Elder looked at the four newcomers, wondering how they would reply, they found that the newcomers paid no attention to their Yang Peak Master, Martial Granduncle, two Vice Peak Masters. At this moment, Yang Hong's son, Yang Fei, also caught up. After standing beside Yang Hong, he looked at the Yang Peak Protector Elder and the two Vice Peak Masters, bowing slightly in greeting. The anger that had just appeared on the faces of the latter three, directed at the four newcomers, instantly vanished, replaced by smiles. Dad, who are they? Soon, Yang Fei looked at the four people walking toward them through the air, frowning while asking Yang Hong beside him. However, when he saw the woman in red leading the group, his eyes suddenly lit up. What a beautiful woman. She feels comparable even to Kier, Li Fei, and Yang Shui. Who is the Yang Peak Master? The youth in purple robes, leading the group of four newcomers, finally spoke. His voice carried out. But the moment his voice reached the ears of Yang Hong and the other four, all five changed expression and revealed coldness. This was simply because they recognized the voice. This voice belonged to the same person who had shouted earlier. Just now, was it you who told me to roll out? Instantly, Yang Hong looked at the youth in purple robes and asked, his face sinking like water. The group, led by the youth in purple robes, was precisely Duan Lingtian, Feng Tianwu, Xiong Quan, and Golden Fiend, who had traveled all the way from the branch base of the Violent Rat clan. They had just arrived at the Yin Yang sect. As soon as they found out the location of Yang Peak, they rushed over immediately. After arriving above the summit of Yang Peak, thinking of his two fiancées who were suffering great hardship, Duan Lingtian's long-held anger completely burst out. Besides letting out a sharp shout demanding the Yang Peak Master rollout, he also fused the fusion profundity and the sword profundity into his origin energy, transforming it into a massive five-colored sword light that pierced Yang Peak from top to bottom, causing Yang Peak's volcano to erupt, turning it completely into an ocean of fire. You are the Yang Peak Master? Hearing Yang Hong's words, Duan Lingtian's eyes narrowed, a cold light flashing across them as he asked in a deep voice, was it you who used my fiancé as a threat to force my other fiancé to marry your son? As he spoke, Duan Lingtian radiated waves of terrifying killing intent. Your fiancé? Yang Hong frowned, unable to react immediately. You are the fiancé of those two sluts. Yang Fei reacted instantly, sizing up Duan Lingtian, his eyes showing traces of jealous hatred. So, those two sluts like little white faces like you. In Yang Fei's eyes, the youth in purple robes standing before him was not only handsome, but also possessed an extraordinary and refined demeanor, making Yang Fei feel ashamed of his own inferiority. Therefore, he could only attack and belittle the other party verbally. Sluts! Almost the instant Yang Fei's voice fell, Duan Lingtian's pupils contracted, and five-colored, sword-shaped flames surged from his body, radiating waves of majestic and vast qi. Swish! Immediately afterward, Yang Hong and the three high-level figures of Yang Peak only heard a fleeting sword whistle. The next moment, crack! It sounded like something cracking, accompanied by a heart-wrenching scream, causing the expressions of the four people to change drastically. As the four turned their heads upon hearing the sound, the first thing they saw was a sky full of splashing blood. Yang Fei's arm was severed at the shoulder, the detached limb falling through the air. Yang Fei continuously let out agonizing screams of pain. Whoosh! Yang Hong's face sank. Without any further hesitation, he raised his hand, and an invisible force swept out, grabbing his son's severed arm. Immediately after, he swiftly pressed the severed arm back to the missing part of his son's arm, attempting to reattach it for him. Whoosh! Another fleeting sword cry sounded, and Yang Hong and the others still didn't have time to react. Crack! Humph! It was the sound of something else breaking, accompanied by a cold snort of suppressed pain. It was Yang Hong, the Yang Peak Master, whose hand, holding his son's severed arm, was cut off at the shoulder. He hadn't even had time to reattach his son's arm before his own arm was severed. Immediately, the two tightly clasped severed arms fell together, plunging into the continuously gushing, scorching magma of Yang Peak and turning to ash in a blink of an eye. During this process, Yang Hong and the others dared not make any further moves. They were so obedient only because of one person's words. Whoever dares to reattach their severed arm, I will make sure they lose an arm too. The cold and chilling words entered Yang Hong and the others' ears, causing a shiver of coldness to rise from the depths of their hearts. However, they dared not doubt the other party's words. You, who exactly are you? Yang Hong stopped the blood gushing from his severed arm's wound, looking at the youth in purple robes before him with a slightly pale face. His eyes revealed a hint of apprehension and shock. The Yang Peak Protector Elder and the two Yang Peak Masters also looked at the youth in purple robes before them with grave expressions. The two consecutive sword strikes just now came from this youth in purple robes, and their speed was so fast that even they didn't have time to react. From this, they could deduce that this youth in purple robes' strength was not inferior to theirs, and possibly even stronger. After stopping the blood, Yang Fei tightly shut his mouth. Although angry, he knew he couldn't afford to provoke Kier and Li Fei's fiancé. How can the fiancé of those two sluts be so strong? Yang Fei roared in anger internally, filled with unwillingness. He was already ashamed of himself, having been completely overshadowed by the other party in terms of appearance and temperament. Now, realizing that the other party's strength far surpassed his heart was filled with nothing but unwillingness. He looks younger than me. How can he have such strong cultivation? Demon, he must be a demon that has lived for 100 years. Finally, Yang Fei began to comfort himself. Those two sluts are truly sluts. To find a demon that has lived for 100 years as a fiancé, I want to see Kier and Li Fei. Duan Lingtian's five-colored sword light and the heaven and earth energy above his head, which hadn't yet formed a heaven and earth phenomenon, had dissipated. He stared coldly at Yang Hong and spoke indifferently. His gaze appeared calm, but it secretly harbored killing intent, giving off an immense sense of pressure, as if a giant rock was pressing down on them. If I don't see them after 30 breaths, your son will surely die. Duan Lingtian, towards the end, directly threatened Yang Hong, the Yang Peak Master. You still haven't answered me. Who exactly are you? Yang Hong had never been threatened like this before. His face grew even uglier, and the milky white flames of elemental energy around him surged, then turned into fiery red flames. Around the fiery red flames, thick purple lightning bolts flickered. Buzz! As the saber chi appeared, the purple lightning-entwined flames around Yang Hong instantly transformed into giant saber-shaped flames, as if they could pierce through the boundless sky. Fire profundity, lightning profundity, saber profundity. At the same time, as a fiery red great saber appeared in Yang Hong's hand, the heaven and earth energy above his head in the void realm surged, quickly gathering to form a heaven and earth phenomenon. Ancient azure dragon phantoms gradually appeared, covering the sky and sun, their aura like a rainbow. Moments later, 4 ancient azure dragon phantoms appeared together, making the hundreds of ancient horned dragon phantoms that appeared with them seem insignificant, as if they were dispensable. 8th level of the Martial Emperor realm. 1st grade spiritual saber. 8th level Imperial Realm Fire Profundity. 5th level Imperial Realm Saber Profundity. 3rd level Imperial Realm Lightning Profundity. This was Yang Hong's full strength. Once he unleashed his full power, he could display the power of the ancient azure dragon from 4 dragons, plus the power of the ancient horned dragon from nearly 1,000 dragons. I said, I am Kier and Li Fei's fiancé. I don't want to repeat myself a 3rd time. Also, there are 25 breaths left now. Facing Yang Hong, who had 4 ancient azure dragon phantoms and nearly 1,000 ancient horned dragon phantoms above his head, Duan Lingtian's expression remained unchanged as he said indifferently, 25 breaths from now. If I still don't see them, you can prepare to collect your son's corpse. That depends on whether you have the ability. Yang Hong, who was already filled with rage due to Duan Lingtian's threat, could no longer hold back after being threatened a 2nd time. He roared and charged towards Duan Lingtian. Although, in his opinion, the 2 sword strikes Duan Lingtian had previously unleashed were incredibly fast, so fast that even he hadn't had time to react. However, subconsciously, he was comforting himself, thinking that it was because he hadn't focused his attention on the opponent and hadn't prepared beforehand. Otherwise, he would definitely have been able to block the opponent's 2 sword strikes. Buzz! Yang Hong shot through the air at extreme speed. As he flicked the saber in his hand, He himself seemed to transform into a giant flaming saber entwined with thick purple lightning bolts. The giant flaming saber shot through the air, emitting waves of scorching aura. Wherever it passed, air currents rolled, transforming into hot gales that swept in all directions. For a moment, everyone present felt hot wind blowing on their faces, as if they were in a blazing furnace. Die! Seeing the fiery red giant saber slashing down from the sky, already close to Duan Lingtian's head, Yang Hong's violent voice sounded at the opportune moment. Boom! At the same time, the flames of the giant flaming saber surged again, and the thick purple lightning bolts entwined around it grew even thicker as a terrifying aura swept forth. Buzz! The power of the giant flaming saber increased, causing its speed and might to also reach their peak. It whistled down towards Duan Lingtian, intending to cleave him in half. For a moment, everyone present held their breath. Die? Die! Yang Fei's eyes showed a hint of madness. In his opinion, after his father's saber strike landed, this youth in purple robes, who had severed his arm, would surely be cut in half. Unlike the somewhat irrational Yang Hong and his son, the Yang Peak Protector Elder and the other two Vice Peak Masters frowned deeply, a vague premonition of ill omen rising in their hearts. In contrast, the woman in red beside Duan Lingtian, Feng Tianwu, stood quietly. She stood there calmly, facing the saber that was slashing through the air towards Duan Lingtian beside her, her expression unchanged, as if she hadn't noticed it at all. As for Xiong Quan and Golden Fiend behind Duan Lingtian, they too were completely calm. Like Feng Tianwu, they were full of confidence in Duan Lingtian. Buzz! The giant flaming saber descended from the sky, accompanied by waves of scorching aura, falling directly onto Duan Lingtian, making him feel as if he was in a sea of fire. When the giant flaming saber was close at hand, Duan Lingtian still made no move, but the power within him had already surged, instantly transforming into 3 5-colored divine dragons. Solidified sword chi flickered around the 3 5-colored divine dragons. Each time they swiftly swept around Duan Lingtian's body, it was like a sharp sword piercing through the air, incredibly fast. Wherever the 3 5-colored divine dragons passed, they formed a light barrier around Duan Lingtian's body, a 5-colored light barrier, protecting Duan Lingtian within. Boom! At this moment, the giant flaming saber descended, precisely striking the light barrier around Duan Lingtian's body. In an instant, the light barrier trembled. Each time the giant flaming saber's power erupted, the 5-colored light barrier would be weakened a bit. But even when the giant flaming saber's power was almost completely spent, the 5-colored light barrier still wasn't broken. How is that possible? Yang Hong, who was within the giant flaming saber, his face changed drastically, his eyes filled with disbelief. Nothing is impossible. As if responding to Yang Hong's words, Duan Lingtian spoke indifferently. Immediately after, he swiftly reached out a hand, actually grabbing the first great spirit tool in Yang Hong's hand, unafraid of the power on it, and snatched it from Yang Hong's grasp. In an instant, Yang Hong's face changed again. To seize the saber from his hand barehanded, one must know that his saber strike contained the power of the ancient azure dragon from 4 dragons, plus the power of the ancient horn dragon from nearly 1,000 dragons. For a moment, as if sensing something, Yang Hong suddenly looked up, staring at the void realm above the youth in purple robe's head. There, a heaven and earth phenomenon had already condensed into form. Moments later, 4 ancient azure dragon phantoms, plus 3,000 ancient horned dragon phantoms, entered his vision, making his face turn incredibly pale. Without a spiritual artifact, merely using a defensive martial skill, his power was comparable to the power of the ancient azure dragon from 4 dragons, plus the power of the ancient horned dragon from 3,000 dragons. He was stronger than Yang Hong, who used a first-grade spirit tool, by over 2,000 ancient horned dragons worth of power. Immediately, Yang Hong realized the gap between himself and the youth in purple robes before him, a chasm-like difference. Who exactly is he? The Yang Peak Protector Elder and the other 2 Yang Peak Vice Peak Masters' faces changed drastically. Although they were mentally prepared, they never expected that without a spiritual artifact, the opponent's power would already completely surpass Yang Hong's, even when he used a first-grade spiritual artifact. How is that possible? The scene before him made Yang Fei's face turn ashen, his pupils constricted, unable to believe that all of this was real. Whoosh! At this moment, Duan Lingtian moved. He flicked the first-grade spirit tool he had snatched from Yang Hong's hand and fiercely swept it towards Yang Hong. The blade landed on Yang Hong's body, and the powerful force sent Yang Hong flying. He flew like an arrow released from a bowstring for 100 meters before stopping. Wah! Wah! For a moment, Yang Hong continuously spat out mouthfuls of congested blood, his face extremely pale. There are 20 breaths left, Duan Lingtian said coldly. Father, seeing his father severely wounded to such an extent, Yang Fei's face changed drastically. After hearing Duan Lingtian's words, his face sank, and he stared at Duan Lingtian with hatred, saying sharply, "They are no longer on Yang Peak. If you want to find them, go find them yourself. Not on Yang Peak." Hearing Yang Fei's words, Duan Lingtian naturally couldn't believe it. His eyes gleamed with killing intent. With a raise of his hand, a vast, invisible force surged out, enveloping Yang Fei and forcefully pulling him in front of him. Immediately after, Duan Lingtian raised his hand, as if to choke someone. Yang Fei seemed to be suspended in the air not far away, and although Duan Lingtian didn't touch him, it was as if an invisible hand was clutching his throat. His face turned red, clearly in extreme pain. "You, what do you want to do?" Yang Fei struggled for a long time before barely managing to squeeze out that sentence. Now, his gaze towards Duan Lingtian was filled with terror, as if he were facing a judge who could decide his life or death. Fair. In the distance, Yang Hong's face also changed dramatically when he saw his son fall into Duan Lingtian's hands. Wow! However, he couldn't catch his breath and spat out another mouthful of clotted blood. His body swayed precariously until he took out and consumed a medicinal pill for healing, only then recovering a little. As for the Yang Peak Protector Elder and the 2 Yang Peak Vice Peak Masters, they remained rooted to the spot, not daring to make any move. Among the 3 of them, the Protector Elder was the strongest. However, the Protector Elder's strength was only comparable to their Yang Peak Master, Yang Hong. Yet, the youth in purple robes before them was someone whom Yang Hong, even with his full power, couldn't even touch a corner of his clothes. He could even exert power stronger than Yang Hong's just by using his bare hands. How terrifying would such a person be once he used a spiritual artifact? They dared not imagine. No, even without a spiritual artifact, with the opponent's strength, he was enough to sweep across their Yang Peak, and even the entire Yin Yang sect. If they went up now, it would be a dead end. 15 more breaths of time. Duan Lingtian extended an invisible force from his hand, forming an invisible hand that choked Yang Fei's neck from a distance. At the same time, he spoke in a cold voice. Now, he could confirm. This young man in front of him was the son of the Yang Peak Master who was going to marry Kier a month later. If it weren't for the fact that the other party still had some use, he would have killed him long ago. He even dared to covet his woman? Such a person wouldn't be enough even if he died 100 times. Yang Peak Master, you must seize the time well. Soon, Duan Lingtian's eyes narrowed, and his icy, knife-like gaze immediately fell on Yang Hong. He spoke in a calm tone. Although his tone was calm, it contained a bone-chilling coldness that made Yang Hong shiver without reason. They have already escaped. Yang Hong took a deep breath, looked at Duan Lingtian, and said in a deep voice, "Escaped?" Duan Lingtian's face slightly darkened. "What do you mean? Before you arrived, I was restrained by their senior sister, Yang Shui, with an innate divine ability, and they took the opportunity to escape to the other side of Yang Peak. We were just about to chase them when you arrived." Yang Hong suppressed his anger, humbly pointed his hand towards one side of Yang Peak. Although that side was also a mountainous forest with complicated terrain, it was not the direction Kier and Li Fei had left. He deliberately pointed in the wrong direction, intending to mislead Duan Lingtian. However, Duan Lingtian didn't know that Yang Hong was misleading him. "What proof do you have that they escaped?" Duan Lingtian asked in a deep voice, his eyes gleaming with a chilling light, as if he wanted to devour someone. "Yang Shui's corpse is on that tree." Yang Hong pointed to a large tree on one side of Yang Peak summit. Now, the area around the tree was completely engulfed by rolling lava, and under the impact of the lava, it was swaying precariously. It probably wouldn't be long before this large tree would be uprooted by the rolling lava. "Golden Fiend." Duan Lingtian spoke lightly. Almost as soon as Duan Lingtian's voice fell, Golden Fiend, standing behind him, moved. He vanished from his spot like a flash of lightning, reappearing beside the large tree. So fast, Golden Fiend's speed astonished the 4 high-ranking officials of Yang Peak, including Yang Hong. Although the speed of this old man in golden robes was far inferior to theirs, it was not much different. He was at least a Martial Emperor Realm 6th level existence. However, such an existence was merely an attendant, a follower, of the youth in purple robes. Whoosh! A moment later, Golden Fiend reappeared before Duan Lingtian. This time, in his arms was a woman in white, covered in blood and completely devoid of life. The woman in white had long white hair like snow, and beneath her white hair was a beautiful face that could be described as devastatingly gorgeous. Aside from being pale and bloodless, it also exuded a hint of coldness. It's really Yang Shui. She's dead. Peak Master, you killed Yang Shui? The 2 Vice Peak Masters of Yang Peak recognized the white-haired woman, and their expressions changed slightly. Yang Shui was the most outstanding disciple among the younger generation of Yin Peak. If the Yin Peak Master and the 2 Yin Peak Vice Peak Masters knew that their Yang Peak Master had killed Yang Shui, they would definitely not let it go. Yang Hong glared at the 2 of them upon hearing this, seemingly blaming them for speaking too much. Master, Golden Fiend looked at Duan Lingtian and shook his head. She's beyond saving. Duan Lingtian withdrew his hand that was restraining Yang Fei with invisible force, then flew in front of Golden Fiend and began to examine the condition of the woman in white in Golden Fiend's arms. Soon, he discovered that, just as Golden Fiend had said, this woman was beyond saving. She's Kier and Li Fei's senior sister, the Shuer mentioned by Peak Master Qin Xiang. Duan Lingtian muttered to himself, as if he had suddenly remembered something. Master, I smelled the scent of 2 women who had been in contact with her, and they went that way. The scent is very faint. They must have left some time ago. Soon, Golden Fiend twitched his nose and pointed towards the other side of Yang Peak. As soon as Golden Fiend said this, Yang Hong and his son exchanged glances, both seeing extreme horror in each other's eyes. He could smell that. Is he a dog? The direction Golden Fiend pointed was precisely the direction Kier and Li Fei had just left. Yang Hong's face darkened immensely as he reacted. If he had known earlier that the youth in purple robes had such a keen-nosed companion, he definitely wouldn't have deliberately pointed in the wrong direction to mislead the youth in purple robes. 2 cents? It must be those 2 little girls. Golden Fiend, hand her over to Xiong Quan, and go bring them back. If you can't find their scent, then call my name and tell them I've arrived. They will follow you. Duan Lingtian's eyes lit up, and then he instructed. As he spoke, his tone became a little more urgent. Although he was anxious, he did not lose his reason. He believed that Golden Fiend going after those 2 little girls would be more effective than anyone else, including himself, because Golden Fiend's true form was a hell golden fur dog, and its nose was particularly keen. Yes, Master. Golden Fiend respectfully responded, then handed the deceased Yang Shui to Xiong Quan and flew away following the 2 scents, like a flash of lightning streaking through the air. Whoosh! Just then, a whooshing sound entered Duan Lingtian's ears. It was Yang Hong fleeing with Yang Fei. As for the other 3 high-ranking officials of Yang Peak, they did not move, because they knew that even if they wanted to escape, they might not be able to. Moreover, if they escaped, it was highly likely to anger the powerful youth in purple robes before them, so they rationally chose not to flee. However, deep within the Yang Peak Protector Elder's eyes, there was a clear hint of painful sorrow, though no one knew what he was thinking. Trying to escape? Duan Lingtian sneered. His figure trembled, and he vanished from his spot, dragon soaring 9 heavens. In an instant, Duan Lingtian transformed into a 5-colored divine dragon, soaring forth like a sharp sword piercing through the air. Upon closer inspection, besides the 5-colored power around Duan Lingtian's body, there was also a layer of solid sword chi, which was precisely his comprehended sword profundity. A moment later, Duan Lingtian overtook Yang Hong and his son, blocking their path. What else do you want? Yang Hong's face changed drastically when he was stopped. He looked at Duan Lingtian and asked in a deep voice, "What do you think?" Duan Lingtian sneered. "We didn't really do anything to your 2 fiancés. Your person has also gone to look for them. With your person's sensitive sense of smell, finding them shouldn't be difficult." Yang Hong took a deep breath, trying his best to suppress the fear in his heart, and spoke with a feigned calm. "That's another matter. Not to mention your attempt to mislead me just now. Do you think I'll let you off after you killed my 2 fiancés' senior sister?" Duan Lingtian's gaze gradually turned cold, and waves of chilling killing intent emanated from him, sweeping out and landing on Yang Hong and his son. Father, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Yang Hong, as the father, was still fine and could withstand Duan Lingtian's killing intent, but his son Yang Fei couldn't. He cried out in distress, his face contorted, and his eyes filled with terror. Yang Shui was killed by me. It has nothing to do with my son. Kill me, and spare my son. Soon, Yang Hong stepped forward, shielding his son behind him, and stared at Duan Lingtian with resolute eyes. Having witnessed Duan Lingtian's strength, he no longer harbored any thoughts of resistance. He only hoped that Duan Lingtian would spare his son after killing him. You are not qualified to bargain with me. Duan Lingtian's gaze was cold. As soon as his voice fell, he vanished from his spot, transforming into a 5-colored giant sword that charged towards Yang Hong and his son. Boom, 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 boom. Wherever the giant sword passed, explosions of qi continuously reverberated, accompanied by the turbulent power of heaven and earth above the void realm, deafeningly loud. In a blink of an eye, Yang Hong and his son were blasted into ashes by the 5-colored giant sword, completely disappearing from this world. Only 2 storage rings and several concept and profundity fragments remained, falling from the sky. It was also because Yang Hong couldn't muster any battle intent in front of Duan Lingtian. Otherwise, if he had gone all out, even if he would eventually die, he could have barely held on for a few breaths of time. Whoosh! Duan Lingtian, who had paused his figure again, raised his hand and collected the storage rings and the concept and profundity fragments of Yang Hong and his son.